You please give it up for Mr. Christopher Kai.
Thank you. I don't need that. Let's give Miles some love, please. It takes courage to be on the stage to share your truth. So whenever someone's on stage, it really is a blessing. So I want all of you to get up for a second, please. Stand up for a second. Whether you realize it or not, our physiology affects how we learn. So you kind of like roll your head a little bit, roll your shoulders, shake your legs out a little bit, get back down. Thank you so much for coming here. Josh, where's Josh? We're going to give Josh some love. Let's give Josh some love for creating this whole thing. Some of the font's off because the formatting's off, but we'll deal with it. But really, our physiology changes how we think and how we learn. So sometimes when you're like, oh, I'm kind of tired, well, move more. I'm kind of depressed. Well, move more, walk more, exercise more. It affects how we think, and it affects how we act. So Michelangelo once said that the greatest danger for most of us is not that we aim too high and miss it, but we aim too low and reach it. So today I'm going to share with you, how do you aim higher in your business? How do you go to networking events that you actually want to go to, that you're inspired to go to, instead of the networking events you go to, you're frustrated, you're disappointed, you feel rejected. That's not a good thing. How do you build your business when you meet people with a sense of confidence? When you walk up to someone, you're so confident, so clear, and so courageous that you're going to secure that client. How do you build a business that's not just based on profit, but on purpose? Now, I don't want to help you just aim higher in your business. I want to help you aim higher in your personal life, too. How many of us have dreams? When you wake up in the morning, you have this beautiful smile on your face. You're like, Chris, I dream one day that I'll write a book. I dream one day that I'll travel to Europe. I dream that maybe I'll learn a new language, a song, or an instrument. And beyond the personal aim high, the business aim high, we don't talk about this enough. I want to help you aim higher in your community. There's 1.5 million nonprofits in our country, over 10 million in the world. What are we doing for those that have less? That's the mark of a man and a woman at the end of our lives. What are we doing for our communities? Make all the money you want, I hope you do. The whole big game concept, I had a mentor years ago. I said, hey, Fred, I want to scale my business. How do I do that? He said, Chris, don't be shooting at rabbits if you want to hunt big game. It has nothing to do with being predatorial. It has everything to do with, you want to aim high? Well, shoot to the sky or to the moon, because that's how you aim high. So let's begin. This guy is the epitome of aiming high, Richard Branson. His name is literally on hundreds of companies. And he's creating an entire industry in space tourism with his company called Virgin Galactic. So there's one truth that I'm going to share with you today. One fact. And that is, the best way to change your life is to change your relationships. The best way to change your life is to change your relationships. And so if you want to be more ambitious, well, hang out with more ambitious people. You want to be more healthy? Hang out with people that aren't picking up that donut at McDonald's and going out there and being like a Josh. Like every time I see him, I'm like, damn, that guy's buff. I gotta work out a little more. The point is, go to the people that are doing what you want, okay? So I'm gonna offer you 7 things on how you can build these relationships, whether with a billionaire, an executive, a celebrity, or anyone, frankly, you meet in life. 7 specific things. The first one is this. We all know that networking is important. We all know that our network is our net worth. But based on science now, it's been proven that your network is the #1 best predictor. #1, not #2, not #5, not #10. The #1 best indicator for your career success. And this is why. So there's a guy named Ron Burt. He actually studies this. Literally, he's a network scientist. He studies this. And he found that the old paradigm is this. All of us congregate around certain groups, whether it's our neighborhood, whether it's our church, whether it's with realtors. So that's a cluster. The new paradigm is, well, how many of us branch outside of our network? If, let's say, I go to a Catholic church, how many times do I go to a Muslim temple, or to a Jewish temple, or do I talk to atheists? How many times do we actually connect with people from outside of the clusters? What I often see at events is, if you're a lawyer and you go to events and you're with two other lawyers, well, you've already just had your own cluster. You need to branch out because the single best thing you can do is to create a network that is beyond what you look like, that is beyond just your church, beyond just your neighborhood, beyond just your socioeconomic background, because that's how you build that number one best indicator for your career success. And if you look at this chart here, the large open network on the left-hand side, literally you're compensated more, you're happier because of the fact that you have a broader based network. Even how I got here. Josh and I have a mutual friend named Jay Campbell from LA, and he has a group on Facebook for entrepreneurs called The Cog. So he put me on this Facebook network. This 19-year-old young man from Sweden reaches out to me and says, hey, Chris, I love your content. I love your videos. I love your YouTube videos and all the things you do. And I'm like, what's up, man? And he's like, no, I'd love for you to mentor me. I'm like, I don't have time. But if you want to learn, you can be my intern. Let's try it out. So I asked him to reach out to different people with podcasts and webinars. He reached out to Josh. So this is a perfect example of how I just met Josh for the first time last month in LA, but we've been talking together for about a year. So talk about open network. A guy in LA introduces me to this social media on Facebook. Some dude in Sweden reaches out to me, and the dude in Sweden reaches out to Josh, and we connect. That's as clear of an example of an open network as possible. This would never happen even 5 years ago. Let's give some examples. There's a guy named Jack. He's horrible in school, gets rejected from Harvard, applies to jobs, and always gets rejected, to the point where he applies to KFC. 24 people apply, 23 people get the job, he doesn't. But little does he know, he grows up in a small town outside of Shanghai. At age 12, he wants to learn English. So he decides every single day for 8 years, every single day, talk about consistency, for 8 years, he rides his bike for 40 minutes because he wants to learn English. He wants to expand his network, literally. So what does he do? He bikes over to a hotel every day, rain or shine, and talks to people and gives them free tours so he can learn English. And in time, this guy literally starts speaking on the world stage, Jack Ma. He's worth $28 billion, and his company, Alibaba, which is like the Chinese version of Amazon, had the highest IPO in the history because he's focused on having an open network. He didn't have relationships. He didn't have these connections in the government. He was a poor guy in China who said, I need to create an open network. What does he do? He literally bikes to his opportunity. He literally says, I'm going to offer something, give you a free tour. Please teach me English. You know how he gets his name? Anyone know his story? One of the pen pals that he creates and nurtures is a foreigner, and she says, you know, Jack, your Chinese name is kind of hard to pronounce. And so Jack says, well, what do you suggest? What name should I use? And she's like, well, my husband's name is Jack, and my dad's name is Jack. Why don't you just be called Jack? That's literally how he got his name. Reid Hoffman. He recently sold his company, LinkedIn, for almost $28 billion to Microsoft. And I want you to look at the third line down. It's all about how extensive your network is. Whether from the network science side, the Ron Bird says it's about open networks, or Reid Hoffman says how extensive, the bottom line is if you look at your phone, and if every single entry is a realtor, or if every single entry is a title company, or if every single entry is a mortgage broker, you need to expand your network. You know, I showed my phone to someone one time, and he was like shocked because like, oh, this is an aerialist, and this is an Olympian, and this is a Grammy winner, and this is a billionaire, and this is a social worker, and this is a teacher. Now, I say this because I love to learn, and so beyond the whole business side of things, going back to what I said before, you aim higher in life when you expand your network. So it's so important, meet people that aren't like you. They don't talk like you, they don't dress like you. Keep that in mind. It's so important. Another guy, Warren Buffett. The funny story about him and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are good friends. They've been friends for about 25 years. But early on, Bill Gates didn't want to meet Warren Buffett. Bill Gates is like, this guy's just a spreadsheet guy. He just knows numbers. He just knows stocks. But Bill Gates' mother, Mary, said, no, you should really meet this guy. He's really interesting. So literally, oh, surprise, surprise. Bill Gates is the richest guy in the world. Warren Buffett is often tied to the second richest guy in the world. He used to be the richest guy in the world. Oh, surprise, surprise. They have the same network. But they were in different networks. They're in different clusters. So keep building the relationships outside of your network, and that's how you will grow in your relationships. Number 2 is mindset. I always want to try to find research and empirical evidence to back up some of the things I say. And when I went to Bill Gates' website, which, by the way, if you want to get depressed and anxious and fearful, watch the news. The news is made for that reason. The news is made so that we're afraid, oh my gosh, there's another flood, there's another terrorist attack. If you want to get inspired, read about the people that are literally changing the world. Bill Gates has his free blog, gatesnotes.org. You can read about all the things that he's doing in the world. So if you're ever depressed or sad, just watch the people that are doing amazing things. And so there's a woman named Carol Dweck who studies mindset, who wrote a book about 10 years ago. And she found that after 20 years of research, it really comes down to 2 very basic things. There's the fixed mindset, and there's the growth mindset. Going back to what Josh said, okay, Chris, I know that already. It's not about what you know. Knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. Knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. So fixed mindset is this. Oh my gosh, Chris, I'm not smart enough. I did really poorly in school. I don't know if I can handle this stuff in school. And those are scars that we have in our past. Oh, Chris, I'm not pretty enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not bulky enough. And lastly, I don't have time. That's the one that we often say, but yet we have 5 hours a day that most Americans on average spend watching TV. 4.7 hours on average people spend on internet, on social media stuff, which doesn't make sense because if people on average are spending 5 hours on TV and 4.7 hours on social media, that's like almost 10 hours of our time. So where are we working? The growth mindset is this. Instead of saying, I'm not smart enough, you say, what can I learn today about myself? Not comparing yourself to anyone in this room, but comparing yourself for who you were yesterday. I want to be a better person than I was yesterday. I'm going to compare myself with yesterday, last week, last month, last year. Instead of saying, oh, I'm not good enough physically, I used to have horrible acne. I had cystic acne, I have scars, I have all this horrible experience. I've had parades of dermatologists that I've met in the past. And so I could easily say, I'm not that good-looking guy with nice skin. Instead of saying that in a fixed mindset, I'm going to say in a growth mindset, how can I be healthier? By walking more, by moving more, by running more. And lastly, it's not that we don't have time. That is the biggest lie we say to ourselves. It's the biggest excuse we say to ourselves, I don't have time. We all have time. It's about your priorities. What are you prioritizing in your life? Because your priorities are what dictate your purpose in life. If you don't have a clear purpose, then your priorities aren't clear. My clear purpose is I want to serve you, I want to give you knowledge, I want to inspire you, I want to inform you. That's my purpose, so therefore my priority is I'll fly here on my own dime, I'll come here yesterday, I'll wake up at 5:30 in the morning, meditate, exercise, and be here so I'm fresh, alive, aware, because I want to serve you. Here's a story of a man that I deeply admire, Mikey Oliveri. His mother tells him when he's a young boy in Jersey, says, Mikey, you have a very rare form of muscular dystrophy. You're not going to live very long. I'm sorry to tell you this. Now, think about that. You're 6 years old. Your mother tells you you're going to die young. Your own mother tells you, Mikey, sorry, you have a disease. You're going to die young. And so what does Michael do? What would all of us do? Mikey retreats into himself. He starts doing these self-destructive things. In junior high school, he literally tries to commit suicide multiple times. He's so frustrated. What do you want to do when you know that your fate is, with muscular dystrophy, every single year, your muscles atrophy, and so at one point, he's going to be in a wheelchair. At 18, he's in a wheelchair, and now he's just distraught. His doctor says to him, you know what, you're going to be dead by 20. So all this fixed mindset is in his life because his mother told him at a very young age, he's going to be dead very early. But one day, he meets a guy that went to Hawaii who was also paraplegic, and he lived his whole life for 30 years in a wheelchair. And so for the first time in his life, Mikey said, you know what? This whole time I've lived in this fixed mindset because I told myself I'm not smart enough, I'm not healthy enough, I have all these dreams that I want to live, but I can't live them. Then he meets one guy, what I call a big gamer, a person of influence, and he completely shifts his mindset to a growth mindset. The growth mindset is now, you know what? Though I live in New Jersey, I'm going to move out to California because that's where I want to live. If this guy went to Hawaii and lived there for 30 years, I can do that too. So Mikey flies out to California. I met him a few years ago. This picture is of him with Richard Branson. He says, you know what? I'm going to live my dreams. I'm going to inspire people. I want Richard Branson to send me up into outer space. He puts a video up online and says, Richard, I have the world record as a person this disabled skydiving. I've gone to these zero-gravity flights. I live my life to the extreme. I aim high. You are that way too. Send me up into outer space because that'll be the first time in my life that I'll feel like I'm whole again. Richard sees that video. Richard invites him, and now they're buddy-buddies. The point is, Mikey is a perfect example of how we can be. Are we going to have that fixed mindset? Oh, Chris, but I'm not that smart. Oh, Chris, I'm really not that pretty handsome. Who cares? We all have issues, right? But have that growth mindset because that's how you'll be more inspired. That's how you'll be more purposeful. And surprise, surprise, you'll make more money too. Third thing is this. There's a charity that raised $101 million in one night. The reason why I focus on billionaires is because they've already qualified the room for you. There's 1,810 billionaires in the world, according to Forbes magazine. 1,810 billionaires. Not even top 1%. It's like the top like 0.0001%. So if they're in a room, then they've already qualified the whole room. And so the first question you might say, well, but Chris, he or she is a billionaire. What do I say? What kind of value do I bring? This is the sad thing. If you place your value only on your bank account, you'll never be that valuable person. But if you place your value on who you are as a person, the character, the compassion, the givingness you have in your heart, then you can walk up to anyone, anywhere, anytime, because your value is not based on your bank account, the car you drive, the suit you're wearing. It's based on the value you place in your heart and in your mind in terms of how you give. So when you go to events with these billionaires, that's a great room to be in because they can literally go anywhere they want, meet anyone they want, buy an island like Larry Ellison if they want. So it's a great way to start focusing on, well, what kind of charities do they focus on? If this charity, for instance, it's the Robin Hood Foundation based in New York City. In one night, they literally raised $101 million. So imagine that room. Now, granted, I know, like, if let's say you've never met a billionaire, you've never been to any of these events, it might be scary, but the point is, again, to have a growth mindset. Not to immediately say in the fixed mindset, well, Chris, I can't do this, I don't know what to say. Look, that's the fixed mindset. Remember, Mikey is in a wheelchair. He's in a wheelchair, but he has a growth mindset, so keep that in mind. It goes beyond the money. It's about the value and the meaning you place on yourself, and it's about pushing yourself. And so it's called the Robin Hood Foundation, and they've literally given over $1 billion. And the thing is with this, we've all heard the term, oh, we got to work the room, Chris. We got to work the room. We've all heard that phrase, right? It's a complete waste of time if you're in the wrong room. Work the right rooms. The right rooms are, you should be able to qualify exactly who the people are. For instance, before I wrote this book last year, my primary clients were men over 40 making $100 million and higher. So if you go to events, and in my case, if I don't go to events with that specific qualifications, then why am I going to the event? Why do we get so frustrated going to events hoping to find the clients when you're better off researching online, looking at who's there, and so when you get there, at least you have a higher probability of knowing who's in the room. There's websites that literally say 42% are C-level executives, 22% are SVPs, 15% are managing partners. So why wouldn't you spend 5 minutes on a website looking at who's going to be in the room, then going to the event, getting all dressed up, and then getting all frustrated when you get that stack of business cards and it goes nowhere? So I create acronyms. Acronyms, in this case, is Nerogi. So pierogi, I think it's a Polish term. But Nerogi, I use these acronyms to remember because whether you realize it or not, we forget 50% of what we learn after an hour. If any of you have issues with your memory, if you want to always learn, again, going back to the fixed mindset, oh, Chris, I have a really poor memory. Growth mindset is learn how to memorize better. There's a book called Moonwalking with Einstein, The Art and Science of Remembering Everything. Moonwalking with Einstein, The Art and Science of Remembering Everything by Joshua Foer. He found that literally we forget 50% of what we learn after an hour. If you use acronyms like Nerogi and you just associate the fact that, oh, wow, Chris is talking about Nerogis, which rhymes with pierogi, I might remember that. And these are the 6 specific things that you want to qualify for your clients. What nationality are they? What age? What race? What occupation? What gender and income? So imagine in my world, literally, let's say from now since I wrote this book, when I qualify the room, why do I fly here? Well, I have a lot of realtor clients. So for me, I have a 100% chance of meeting my potential clients. Do I get them or not? Who knows? But I know at least this room is the right room for me to network. Does that make sense? So keep that in mind because it's about using specific things that you can learn in a growth mindset. Next one is this. Let's say you meet people, you want to connect with them because one of the most common questions I get asked is, Chris, what do I say when I meet someone? I don't know what to say. Beyond what you say, you should be listening. We don't do this enough. We're on this all the time. There's a company named Locklet. They're an app company. They found that they surveyed a bunch of their customers, and they found that on average, they check their phones 110 times per day. But the high-frequency ones check it 900 times a day. Now, that's like some serious addiction when you're like, oh my gosh, 900 times a day. I mean, that's like serious addiction. The point I'm getting at is this. Stop talking. Shut up more. Listen. This character is a Chinese character for listen. What's crazy about Chinese characters is not just one character. It's actually small characters all pieced together that create another character. So in this case, to listen, if I say 我听到你, you have the ears, which is obvious, but then you have the eyes, because you're listening now with the ears, but with the eyes. Right below that, it says focus, but really that character is one, meaning you're listening to them with one divided attention. And right below that is heart. This is the most important thing. We live in such a cynical world where if you see something that happens, you're like, that can't be true. Because we've been taught that. You watch the news, you meet people on the street. Again, we're all salespeople per se, but the point is, if you don't listen with your heart, you're not really listening. So if you're listening to someone, make sure you're focusing on what they're talking about, and the two things you want to focus on are their interests and their relationships. It applies to billionaires, and it applies to everyone else in between. For instance, yesterday I got off the plane at 11:30 at the Phoenix airport. I flew in from LA, and I needed to shine my shoes, so I went up to the shoe shine person, and there's a gentleman there already shining his shoes. He was just on a smartphone. This woman was shining his shoes, did a great job. The customer leaves. I walk up, get my shoes shined. First question I ask her is, tell me your story. Smile. She's like, oh, I don't have any stories. I don't have any stories. But we all have stories, right? So I ask her, no, Amina. I looked at her name tag. Amina, used the person's name. Amina, no, really, tell me your story. And she's like, well, I don't really, I just have a lot of sad stories. I'm like, well, what do you mean? It turns out that Amina's from Ethiopia. It turns out that she's really sad that her family's there still, and the person that's there is a dictator, and that if someone protests, they literally get shot. But I asked her, well, what are some good things about Ethiopia? What do you want to teach and share with Americans? She's like, well, there's beautiful farms there. We used to plant barley and wheat and tomatoes. And so all these things I learned just by listening and asking questions. So now when I look at my shoes, I don't just see these shoes that I bought from Hugo Boss. I see Ethiopian-inspired shoes by Amina. They're simple things, but how cool is that I just spoke to a woman who easily we can say, oh, she's not a billionaire, Chris. I thought you focused on billionaires. This is a lie now. I thought you were going to teach me how to meet billionaires. It applies to anyone. Listen more to people around us because hopefully that woman knows that she has value. She has purpose because she taught me about Ethiopia, and that's beautiful. Two more examples. I gave a keynote in Puerto Rico last year, going back to, again, interests and relationships. You want to learn things, be in the physiological state to learn, but also repeat. Those of you say, I already know this, well, so what? That's a fixed mindset. It's not about knowing, it's about doing. Growth mindset is learn, apply, teach. In a Puerto Rico conference last year for realtors, they have sold properties from $1 million to $100 million. I meet a guy named Jim from San Francisco. For whatever reason, he loves sailing. This is during lunchtime, by the way. There's 120 realtors there. Jim and I connect. I used to live in the Bay Area. I now live in Los Angeles. And for whatever reason, his eyes light up when he's talking about sailing. And I'm saying, Jim, why do you like sailing so much? And he actually never thought about it. He's like, well, I just like it's just really relaxing and it's laid back. But I'm like, well, but why? Like, probe deeper. And it turns out that his father was abusive to him as a kid. His father on the outside was this man of stature who had all these amazing things that he was doing, but behind closed doors, he was literally abusing his son. And so he said, finally in that conversation with me, he's like, Chris, thank you so much for giving me this eye-opening experience. The reason why I love sailing is because it allowed me to get away from my problems, which was the fact that my father used to abuse me. And the cool, happy ending for the story is that when his father, before he passed away, He forgave his father. His father told him I was sorry, but it was so amazing to know that we're at lunch at a conference. I'm talking to this guy who, going back to the open networks, he's Caucasian, I'm not. He's 65, I'm not. He doesn't have hair, I do. But again, I could have easily just went to, oh, where's that Asian person? I got to talk to those Asian people, right? Or I can say, I want to meet people that don't look like me. I want to meet people that aren't in my industry because that's an open network. The other example I have is I was in Jerusalem earlier this year for a US concept program teaching entrepreneurs there, and I asked the same question. Instead of asking them, what do you do for a living, ask them, hey, you know what? I went to this really cool speech by Christopher Kai. He wrote a book about networking, and he said, instead of asking what you do, ask, who's the one person you most enjoy spending your time with? Who's the one person you most enjoy spending your time with? Now you tell me, is that going to be a more meaningful conversation than, what do you do? Right? So I asked this woman in Jerusalem, so who's the one person? And she says, Chris, every morning I wake up and I go swimming with my swimming partners. If I don't go swimming, I get all anxious, I get depressed, I get sad. But if I go to swim, I just feel alive and happy. And so what happens is this is not my opinion. This is physiology. There's 4 chemicals that are going on, just like when I asked you to stand up before. The 4 chemicals are dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, and serotonin. When you talk about their interests and their relationships, whether it was gym and sailing or this woman in Jerusalem about swimming, their physiology changes. So they're not going to even know that they're like, oh my God, Chris is so cool and amazing. I'm not cool and amazing. They are. I'm just mirroring their experiences. I'm mirroring their relationships. I'm mirroring their interests. And so it's amazing because they feel that they're heard. They feel remembered. And it's amazing to know that it's not just an opinion. It's actually empirically studied. So going back to acronyms, DEOS, dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, serotonin. Talk less, listen more with your ears, your eyes, and your heart, and you'll be so much more building those relationships. Next one is this. How do you be more effective as a communicator? John already talked about the words we use, the tone, the body language. I'm going to talk about this. So there's a guy named Carmine Gallo. He wrote a book called Talk Like Ted, which for those of you who want to learn more, grow more, get more inspired, TED.com has free videos. It's a conference that is like the Super Bowl of world leaders and thought leaders, but they have 20-minute videos, inspiring videos on all different types of topics. And this guy, Carmine Gallo, found that, you know what? Even back in the Aristotle days, 10% was about the credibility. So when Miles introduced me, Christopher's an international speaker, he's given over 1,000 speeches, he's spoken at New York Life and American Express, those are the credentials. But that's only 10%. The 25% is, well, what are the empirical evidence backing your research, Chris? Well, that's why I talked about these happy chemicals. That's why I talked about this network science, right? That's 25%. But the 65% is the stories, the emotional appeal we have toward people, and how we feel. Maya Angelou once said, she said that you might not remember what a person says or where you were, but you'll always remember how you felt when you're with that person. So the thing is, I'll tell you a little bit more about the story later on, but focus on not just your credentials, but on the facts and figures, and lastly, the emotional appeal, the pathos. So here are some things on being more successful. Grant Cardone is one of those guys that I admire. He's a sales guy based out of Miami Beach. And he talks about how if you want to succeed more, you have to follow up. I mean, you're literally wasting your time going to an event, getting business cards, and leaving those business cards onto that table. You're literally wasting your time. You might as well just like burn cash away. Because if you have those business cards, you don't follow up, you're just burning cash away. 80% more successful if you follow up, not just after the first time or second time, after the 5th to the 12th time. Most of us email someone, text someone, call someone, you're like, oh, but Chris, they didn't respond. So you assume, well, they're probably busy and you don't want to bother them. Just thinking that you don't want to bother them, that's already a fixed mindset. The growth mindset is maybe they're busy, who knows? How many of you check and respond to every single email you get? None of us do. So I'm going to first walk through what you shouldn't do. So after I wrote this book last year, I'm getting requests literally from all around the world. Unsolicited, solicited friends, it's just crazy, right? It's like, hey, Chris, I know you know Elon Musk. I know you know this billionaire. Can you introduce me? I'm like, why? Josh has this, GSD mode thing. I mean, so many of us don't get past the GAS test. The GAS stands for give a shit. Why should I give a crap, right? So this person, I don't know, Facebook messages me. You don't have to even see what it says, but pretty much he's looking for money. He wants someone to back his funds, his films. He's supposedly an Emmy winner and a Cannes winner. And then after this message, he sends me all these pictures. I'm like, dude, like I don't even know you. So the first impression he makes is asking for money. Doesn't pass the gas test. Next, this I wouldn't really call her a friend, but I've seen her around. She like Facebook messages me again. Hey, Chris, I have this free event at 7 o'clock. Do you want to come by and check out my presentation? It's 6:49. I mean, 6:39, so 21 minutes before a presentation. She's like, yeah, please come out. I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to drop everything and go watch a presentation. Again, doesn't pass the why should I give a crap. Lastly, this is the most horrendous, grammatically, whatever person I've ever met. Meet this guy at a private membership entrepreneurship conference in San Diego I spoke at 2 months ago. So I send out an email every week, right? He's like, you check this email. You spells you. Now maybe it's because I'm a writer, so I'm a bit of a stickler about that, but like he doesn't spell any of his things capitalized, and it's just like, can I get 5 minutes of your time? Again, all these people are like, oh, I just need 5 minutes of your time, Chris. I just need $10,000. I just need $100,000. Like they're asking all these things. I don't even know them. And he's like, when I push back on him, I'm like, dude, like, why are you asking me? I don't even know you. And then lastly, he's like, gets all offended. He's like, don't say I didn't ask you. So he gets all offended. I'm like, is that the best way to approach a conversation? If you say you want to meet and engage me, is it the best way to say, don't tell me I didn't offer this to you? So I tell you these things because it's so frustrating. You talk about like, effective communication 101. You meet someone for the first time, you're asking for something. I don't even know them. Because in their world, they're like, no, but Chris, it's a great opportunity. Well, so are the 500 other people that asked me the same question. So can you imagine Oprah Winfrey or Elon Musk? They get approached tens of thousands of times or millions of times. I'm just getting approached a few hundred times. But imagine, like, just get out of your own space. We are important as individuals, but if you can't add value, why should they respond? So for me, I'm always like, look, I speak for a living. You want me to respond to your emails? Say, hey, Chris, I have this paid speaking gig that I might want you to speak at. Well, guess what? My assistant will probably get back to you pretty quickly. But if you have all these people that are sending things like, oh, I just need 5 minutes of your time. I just need you to watch my presentation. And then he gets offended. He's like, oh, dude, I thought we were buddies. I'm like, dude, we spoke for 3 minutes at a conference 2 months ago. You're lucky I even remember your name. And the only reason I remember your name, Eric, is because you annoyed me. Not a bad impression to have. So here's what you should do. What you should do is this. I want to make sure I'm on point, so I got about 15 minutes. What you should do is this. Add value. I have a newsletter called Be Inspired every week. I send articles, videos, and events. Surprise, surprise, acronym. Avenues of follow-up. Send articles, videos, and events. Who doesn't like a cool article? I have a client named Doug. He has a massive restaurant conglomerate. He makes about $200 million a year. He has difficulty motivating his employees. I said, hey, Doug, here's an interesting article I read about how do you motivate your employees. Elon Musk. I read one time, he has difficulty sleeping. I'm like, hey, Elon, here's a video you might like. Lastly, events. This is the best thing with real estate, especially on the higher end side. All this social media is great, but nothing will ever replace looking at someone in the eye, giving them a firm handshake, smiling, asking them, how are you? But literally asking them, thumbs up, right? But again, we all say that, oh, yeah, we're great. But the events are great because it allows you to build that high-touch engagement. One of my friends, she used to be a CFO of Coffee Bean. I don't know if you have Coffee Bean out here, but it's like Starbucks' competitor. And I'm always building my relationships. So Jack Welch is the CEO, former CEO of GE. He's speaking in LA, low price point. I think it's about $50 for a ticket. And I say, hey, Angie, come by and listen to Jack Welch. Because again, high-level people want to meet other high-level people. Don't be invited to the coffee. Again, I get invited to coffee and lunch. I'm like, look, I don't have time for your coffee and lunch. What they really want is private consulting, like free consulting work, right? So add value, stand out. What do business people want? They want more business. In Angie's case, what does she want? She wants to learn from Jack Welch, because she's at a level that, she's a former CFO of a very publicly and privately traded companies. So in her case, I invite her to Jack Welch, and surprise, surprise, I meet one of my clients there who's an executive at City National Bank, and they manage about $35 billion. So whenever you meet people, give them value, give them articles, give them videos, and how do you know? By asking questions. What do I do usually when I meet people? I literally email them my book. So the worst example is, oh my God, I met that guy Christopher Kai. Holy crap, he was horrible. He gave me an ebook. What was he thinking? That's the worst impression I'm going to give this person, right? But hopefully they say, you know what? Even if I never see that person ever again in life, at least they know that Christopher Kai spent 20 years researching a book, and I just gave them a free book. And what's sad is that, when you give things free, people don't value that. But when you have them pay for it, they value it more. And it was really, really sad. Like, I was giving a speech a few months ago, and I was selling my books for like $20. Like, I got paid tens of thousands of dollars to speak for a living, and like, this kid's like, he's like 20-something years old, and I'm like, do you want to be a millionaire? He's like, yes. And I'm like, so you're not going to buy a book, cost $20, that teaches you how to meet, engage, and follow with these people, and yet you'll spend $200 on like a weekend at Vegas, right? So back to priorities. Make the investments when it's necessary, because if you don't make investments of your time and money, you will never be successful. Make sure you follow it with value. Lastly is this: stand out and be remembered. Stories are 22 times more memorable than facts. Stories are 22 times more memorable than facts. So here's my story. I was born and raised in New York City. My mother was a school teacher. My father was a case manager. So you might think, oh, I can't do this, Chris. Well, now you can, because trust me, I'm going to tell you my story. Middle-class upbringing, hand-me-down clothes. I used to get my mom, bless her heart, she didn't cook very well. Hopefully she's not going to watch this. But she used to make hamburgers, not with hamburger buns, but with Wonder Bread. So she'd put the hamburger onto the Wonder Bread, put it into the Ziploc bag. I'd go to school. I'm really, really hungry. I would open up my brown paper bag, and I just see this soggy hamburger. Right? So I didn't grow up with any means, any access, any connections, any wealth. And I had a lot of struggles too. You can't read what that says, but it pretty much says the 4'10", 4'10" at the time. But I talked a lot in school, so I got punished. I was ridiculed, and they told me I had a reading disability, so I felt I was stupid. But the last thing was I was really short. I was the shortest kid in my class for 8 years going to elementary school. And then my mother sent me to a school which all boys, and so I was 4'10" going into high school. So that's a picture of me, 4'10". Now, if you're a woman and you're short, it doesn't really matter, frankly, because you can just wear heels. But if you're a guy and you're short, it's really sad. To the point where before Twitter, people just blast you. Like, Bobby's like saying, oh, I'm looking forward to seeing your little head roaming around in school. And Ray's like calling me a dwarf. And my favorite is Noel. He doesn't even call me by my name. You can't read it. This is actually from my 8th grade graduation book. He's like, Tu Ching. Don't worry, keep eating those vitamins. Be patient, you'll grow. So I text Noel this. I'm like, dude, this is so funny. I was looking back at our yearbook, and I found what you wrote here, and he completely denied it. He's like, no, I didn't write that, Chris. I'm like, no, Noel, I think you did, because that was his nickname, the Twixter. Him and I both are really skinny. And I share this with you as this. We've all had scars in our past. We've all had disappointments. We've all had rejection. We've all had failures. But what's so sad and unfortunate is that we allow these scars to dictate our successes. We allow the scars in our past, whether emotional, physical, mental, whatever it might be, we allow these scars to dictate our future successes. And so what I ask you to do is, when you want to aim higher, you can't have that fixed mindset, which is why it's so important to hang out with people like Josh and Albert and John. I will literally cut people out of my life if they're negative. I'm not talking about, oh, it's a tough, market, or I'm talking about, okay, if you're like getting like bypass surgery, or you got into an accident, I'll listen. But if you're whining about how your day was because you couldn't close a client, or some traffic jam, or someone that like got angry at you, those are like gnats, okay? Those are like mosquitoes. You're the elephant. You'll always have those things in your life. Don't worry about those gnats and mosquitoes, because you'll always have those people, and hopefully you are not those people, okay? So I share these stories because they're 22 times more memorable. When you meet people, share your story and listen to their story, because otherwise they're not going to remember you. What happens is this. You go to an event, you get all excited, you get a stack of business cards, you go back home, you're looking for these business cards, and you're literally like, Michael Johnson, wait, who's that? Candace Curley, who's that? Like, you're looking at these people, you know you've met them, but you don't remember anything about them. So make sure you find some level of connection, whether with their interests or the relationships, because you're going to be that person in that pile of business cards on the other end, and they're not going to remember you. Okay? Thankfully for me, I had this guy in my life. Though I was being ridiculed, bullied, teased, beaten up in school, at 12 years old, my Uncle Ding said, you know what? My Chinese name is G. He's like, G, you're a smart guy. I'm going to take a chance on you. He had a boutique insurance company in Lower Manhattan. While on one end I was getting bullied, my uncle was like, no, you're amazing, you're talented, you're trustworthy, and you're hardworking. And so I had that big gamer, that person of influence in my life. And from him, I learned how to buy stocks. From him, I learned how to invest my money. From him, I learned the true calling, which is what entrepreneurs do. They serve their clients. They give value. It's not just some catchphrase, some cool phrase about adding value. It's believing that you have to be valuable yourself. If you don't believe you're valuable, how can you add value to someone else? In my uncle's case, as an immigrant coming to the United States, having his own entrepreneurship dream fulfilled is phenomenal, and he taught me. So the reason why this is important for you is you have to find people in your life that create that foundation. It's really, really, really hard to build confidence in yourself and meet people if you don't have a foundation. If you don't have people in your life, then find people around you. It's really important. Remove the ego. Remove that sense of, oh, I know how to do this. I remember at one point, I had a client, he literally sells toy guns. It's called bucket salt. It shoots flies with a pinch of salt. He literally raised over $500,000. You laugh, but he raised $500,000. This is a multi-million-dollar business based on the fact that he spent a few $100,000 on creating a toy gun that's this big, really bright yellow, and it shoots flies with a pinch of salt. It costs like $40. At one point, I was hired on as his worldwide marketing and sales executive, and I needed to learn about e-commerce. I could have been very, very egotistical and very, very arrogant and not learn from someone who was 20 years old at the time, who literally made his first million when he was 16 years old. And I said, Mike, can you please teach me about this e-commerce world? Because he built his own online website and literally, again, made $1 million by the time he was 16. When I met him at 20, he was already a multimillionaire. So if I say, well, I know so much more than this guy, but instead I said, you know what? I'm going to keep my ego at the door and say, Mike, can you please teach me? So for those of you in this room who think you're so experienced, you've traveled all around, great. But if you want to learn about social media, talk to someone who's 22, not 62. Not to knock the 62-year-olds, but you need to meet the people that are naturally inclined to do what they do. Okay? So keep that in mind. Lastly, I'll share one other story. You know, you're not going to always realistically have a chance to tell them like your whole life story or listen to the life story. So I'll keep it really simple. My mother named me after St. Christopher. St. Christopher is the patron saint of transportation. He supposedly was 7'5" tall, so just you could please imagine with me, he had these really broad shoulders. He's a Canaanite, 7'5" tall, and apparently there's this raging river, and his goal in life was to carry people along this raging river to the other side. So it's kind of cool that my mother named me after St. Christopher, because I see that as my goal and my purpose in life, to carry people along the raging river of their life. So one day, he carries this little baby on his shoulders. And for whatever reason, with every single step he takes, he's literally like, you know, what the hell's going on with this kid? It's like he's literally almost drowning. He passes the river, puts the child down, and is almost like angry at the child. He's like, what's going on? And it turns out that this little boy, this little kid, is Christ, Jesus Christ reincarnated. His name, Christopher, means Christ bearer. He's bearing the burden of Christ. So I took 2 minutes to share a story about my name. So it doesn't matter how much time you have. You literally want to have a bag of stories wherever you go. Whether it's about a woman named Amina who's shining my shoes at the airport from Ethiopia, or it's about my own story about getting these soggy hamburger sandwiches, because the point is, if you don't share your stories, they're going to forget you. Not just in that room, but in life. So make sure you understand how to share stories, how to process stories, how to engage stories, using that body language. So if you say, yeah, Chris, I'm really passionate about entrepreneurship. Oh, really? Well, your voice doesn't sound that way. And these things you can train. Join Toastmasters, take an acting class. Like, there's no excuse. No one ever feels so energetic. When people meet me for the first time, it's like, wow, Chris, you're so energized. What do you do, man? Do you drink a lot of coffee? I'm like, actually, I don't drink any coffee. It's about purpose. When you know your purpose in life, if you know your purpose is to serve, you can completely be vulnerable. It doesn't matter what people say. You can hate my speech, but you're not going to say, Chris wasn't very honest. You're not going to say that. So make sure you know your story. Make sure you ask them their story, because if you don't do that, you're not going to be remembered. If you're not going to be remembered, how are you going to secure more clients? Whether with a $1 million listing, $20 million, it doesn't matter. It goes across the board. Summary is this: networking is literally the #1 best predictor of your career success. Make sure you have that mindset. Make sure you're not focusing on working the room. That's working hard. Working smart is finding the right rooms to work. 4 happy chemicals: dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, and serotonin. Talk about their interests and their relationships. Listen to them. Be effective by focusing on the pathos and the logos, not just your credentials. And the last 2 is you have to follow up because you are literally burning away cash. You are burning away cash if you don't follow up. And then the most important is if you don't share your story, they're going to forget you. Jim, the guy I met in Puerto Rico last year, I will literally remember him for the rest of my life. Because how many of you, like again, on the outside surface, you will see 2 dudes at a lunch-in hugging each other. Because we had such a powerful conversation at lunch, him talking about his father getting abused, like that's pretty crazy. But again, it was at lunch. I just met this guy. But I'll never forget him, ever. And he also invited me to the Bay Area to go sailing. So that's powerful. This is all the things that I put into this book. It isn't just 7 skills, it's 20 skills. And please sign up for the newsletter. I'll share one final story. So a woman earlier that I met, she asked me, oh, you speak all around the world. Is this another one of those days? I'm like, no. Every single time I speak, just like what John said, it's a unique experience. I grew up in New York City. I was born and raised there. I used to work at 7 World Trade Center. That was the 3rd building that collapsed. So as soon as I got into this building, I literally got chills because I used to work at 7 World Trade, the 3rd building that collapsed. I have family and friends and coworkers. They're all there. Thankfully, I moved out here by that point. But then my last thing I want to say is this. You can listen to all these amazing speeches today, or you can do something with them. And what I encourage you to do is find one person every month that you want to meet that's outside your network. In a year, you'll have 12 different open networks. If you want to be really ambitious, meet one person every week. So in a year, you'll meet 52 different open networks. Because what do we often do? Again, we'll go to the same church. If I'm Christian, that person's Muslim, oh, those bad Muslims. If I'm Muslim and that person's atheist, oh, you don't believe in God. If I'm atheist and that person's Jewish, oh, that Jewish person. I just came back from Israel and Palestine. It's the saddest thing to know what's going on there. But the point is, if we're not open-minded, we'll never learn. This is why we have so many problems in life. John F. Kennedy, I think, once said that when communication is impossible, conflict is the only thing that happens. So keep that in mind that if you don't have open networks, you'll always start going back into the stereotypes. You'll always just saying, oh, those people are like that. And if you don't open your mind, you'll never grow. And the last thing I'll end is this. Like I said, courage is like a rubber band. I literally could be dead right now if I didn't have the courage to step out in my growth zone and move out to California. So courage is literally the single most important quality I see of successful people. And by success, I don't just mean by money. I've met some of the most depressed, horrible people in the world. I don't want to judge, but I've literally, when you say, oh, I want to be rich, Chris, I don't doubt that. I want to buy this nice car. But I'm just saying, I've met some of the wealthiest, famous people in the world, and some of the most unhappy people not because of the money, because they don't have the courage to provide for other people. They don't have the courage to serve. So all I ask you to do is do one thing you're afraid of every week, and that one thing is the best way to change your life is to change your relationship. So meet one person outside your network. Thank you so much.
Awesome, brother. All right.